Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com, a free site, bettingangle.us, a free site. Today is November the 7th, 2025. Let's talk about an 8-2 team, the Denver Broncos, with the recognition that this is not a fan club site. But first, remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Now, folks, we're picking on the Broncos this morning because they just played a game. They won the game. They just played a game against a divisional rival, the Raiders, where the Broncos were favored by 9.5 points at home, right, with Bo Nix at quarterback. Now, let me just say, I believe it takes quarterbacks a few years to figure out the pro game. Right? I think a quarterback could start his career, look a little shaky at first, and then right the ship. Actually start to look better as time goes on. People forget how many picks Peyton Manning threw early in his career. I want to invite people to look up his numbers. And Peyton Manning, by the time he retired, we all knew he was a first ballot Hall of Famer. Right? So let me just say this diplomatically. You know, I bet games, but I'm really a futures bettor. And I believe this is a gift to futures bettors. Bo Nix is not ready. If you're betting futures, and I understand Denver is trying to imitate what they have going on in Philly, right? You have a quarterback who's an athlete. Bo Nix can run, not as good as Jalen Hurts, but he's actually one of the better athletes at the position. If you look at him long enough, you realize this is a guy who you have to keep in the pocket, or he's going to run for 15 yards, right? Just understand, in Philly, even though they have A.J. Brown, one of my favorite receivers, who's neglected in Philly, right? They have a Heisman Trophy winner, Devontae Smith. Last year, Philly won the Super Bowl really with a great defense, with a 2,000-yard running back, right? With the tush push, which they're still using. With turnovers, they got a couple of picks on Pat Mahomes. They were aggressive, right? This year, Denver's defense is ranked 6th in the NFL according to Pro Football Focus. But what I want people to do is to look at the box score, because it tells you all you need to know about Denver's real chances. Bronco fans, you have an open invitation from me to disagree with me in the comment section of this video. If you're a Pro Football Focus subscriber, look at where the Raider defense is ranked. The Raiders are ranked 30th. Right, 30th. So let's look at the numbers from yesterday. Right, again, this was a game where the Broncos were favored by 9.5. They won the game by 3 points. They scored at home, nationally televised game. They scored a total of 10 points. Right? 136 passing yards against the 30th ranked defense in the league. Yards per attempt, 4.9. Rushing yards per attempt, folks, this team's not going to be confused as having a Saquon Barkley. 3.1 yards per attempt. You want to know how many first downs the Broncos got yesterday against the 30th ranked defense in the league according to Pro Football Focus? Understand, 20 is a fair number, right? You look at these box scores, you'll see, a good team might have 25, 26 first downs in a game. right? You see a team and they're below 20, let's say they have 18 first downs. You'd say, oh, that team was a little bit overwhelmed in that game. Right, folks? Don't be fooled by the win. The Broncos yesterday against a bad defense had 10 first downs. 10 first downs. Let me repeat that one more time. 10 first downs. So you have a gift this year, right? I'm telling you, in my opinion, the top 5 teams are all in the NFC. You have an AFC that's struggling to define itself, right? Just when people started to believe again in the Chiefs, they went to Buffalo and lost, didn't they? Right? You're looking at the Bills and you're asking yourself the question, do I trust this defense? You're looking at the Chargers. I'm naming teams with winning records. In fact, I'm naming teams that many feel, have an inside shot at winning the conference. You look at the Chargers and you're just waiting for the game where they play a Miami or some lesser team and they actually stomp them out. Right? You look at the team and you say, yeah, this team is dominant. Folks, the Chargers struggled against Miami. Struggled. Right? The Chargers don't put away teams, do they? Right? You started to believe that things were different this year. You saw Jonathan Taylor. He's leading the league in rushing. You said, hey, here's a Saquon level back. You saw Daniel Jones and you thought, you know what, maybe the Giants just didn't know how to coach him. Right? You went into that Steeler game and you had never seen Daniel Jones actually look as bad as he looked in some of these Giant games. Then suddenly the turnovers started. Then you understood, wow, I'm dealing with a volatile quarterback. Right? The Steelers had him throwing the ball into double and triple coverage? Then you started to ask the question, wow, are the Colts really as good as their record suggests? Right, folks, that question still hangs in the air. So here's what I think I know with certainty. Right, the Colts, I don't know with certainty. Maybe they are that good. Right, we all have off days. Right, but Bo Nix, in his second year, right, and I saw Bo in college. Very good quarterback. Understand, this is a guy who was the starter at Auburn and Oregon. Right, very good quarterback. But Bo Nix played the Jets and ended up with something like 13 points. Didn't he? He just played the Raiders. High-profile game. The Raiders just played an overtime game that came down to the closing seconds of overtime. Right? It's a short week. The game was on a Thursday. You thought, wow, if there's a spot where the Raiders would be tired and not ready and where the Broncos would be able to make a statement, you thought clearly this nationally televised game, Thursday night game, was going to be a showcase for them. Right? Against Jacksonville, didn't Geno rely on Brock Bowers a bit too much? Didn't the Raiders just trade a wide receiver? Right? You thought, wow, if they cover Brock Bowers, who I believe caught something like 12 balls against the Jacksonville Jaguars, you thought if the Broncos just stuck him, given that the Raiders, after spending a first-round pick on a running back, can't run the football. You thought, how are the Raiders going to do anything? Right? Tyler Lockett just showed up, didn't he? Well, folks, just understand, the Bronco offense didn't show up. This is a team that has had problems all year. Folks, after 3 quarters against the New York Giants, the Broncos had no points. I know they went on to win the game. As I like to say in talking about boxing, knockouts cause amnesia. Right? These late wins where you're getting dominated by a below 500 team, and I mean dominated. Right? Giants were scoring a lot of points. They'd given up no points. Now, the fourth quarter is one of those outliers. Right? Broncos came back and won, and I know everyone has amnesia about the first 3 quarters. You're a gambler. You can't. You've seen enough terrible Bo Nix performances this year to know he's not ready to compete. Right? They have 8 wins after 10 games. This is a gift for gamblers because as you bet futures and you're thinking, who wins the AFC? There are another set of futures. Who wins the Super Bowl? And you're, picking teams and stuff like that, and you're prepared to hedge and stuff like that. Don't pick the Denver Broncos. Right? They're not ready. I would say, Bo Nix is below Jalen Hurts, well below Jalen Hurts at this point in his career. Right? I would even argue one of the secrets to Philly is that they were in the Super Bowl 2 years ago. Right? They had a double-digit lead on Pat Mahomes in the second half. This is the Super Bowl before the Niners played Pat Mahomes. Right? Who's a Super Bowl regular? Well, let me just say, the Eagles then played Mahomes again. And that's when Jalen Hurts, who cost the Eagles the first Super Bowl with a terrible fumble, had the maturity, had the experience to actually win a Super Bowl. I would argue that very few of these quarterbacks do. And the secret to the AFC is that you have teams like Kansas City that have experience winning playoff games. You have some of the best quarterbacks in the game, right? The reigning MVP is Josh Allen. Lamar Jackson has 2 MVPs. Right? Whether they give him an MVP or not, Pat Mahomes is one of the very best quarterbacks in the entire league. Against that level of competition, a team like the Broncos, no matter how dazzling their defense is, and understand now they're without Pat Surtain, but no matter how dazzling their defense is, again, Pro Football Focus has them ranked 6th. When you can only put up 10 first downs against the Las Vegas Raiders, when you're averaging 3.1 yards per attempt rushing, in other words, just cross off the rushing attack. Well, cross off the passing attack. Less than 5 yards per attempt passing. 136 passing yards against the Raiders. Right, folks? If these are the numbers you're putting up after only scoring 13 points against the Jets and no points through 3 quarters against the Giants, I don't care what the record is. They could go 15-2. Right? This is a team that's not ready to win the AFC. Right? You think about, who to fade. Let's say you have a hedge on this team, and Lord knows they've exceeded expectations, right? They're 8-2 right now. You think about the teams to fade in the playoffs, folks, this has to be one of them, right? The box score should be all over the internet. Break it down yourself, right? You just saw a great ad job. I was, watching Amazon's coverage. They had both Al Michaels and Kirk Herbstreit, talking to Bo Nix and stuff like that. Hey, I know a storyline in this league, has young quarterbacks doing the impossible, right? Jaden Daniels made the conference championship game last year. Right, folks? Now things are reverting to the mean. Right? While people remember Jaden Daniels making the conference championship game, as they overvalue Bo Nix, just understand the database goes back past Jaden Daniels. Right? Dan Marino, second-year quarterback, made the Super Bowl. Passed for more than 5,000 yards. Right, folks? You have to go back to the 80s for stuff like that. Right? You have a second-year quarterback. He's not ready. You saw that against a divisional opponent who knows him. Right? Pete Carroll, of course, comes from a defensive background, the head coach of the Raiders. Right? Just understand, if the Raiders, with the 30th ranked defense, could throw a look at Bo Nix that had him puzzled, if the Giants, who are under 500 as I make this video, could throw a defensive look that confused Bo Nix, if the Jets could throw a look that confused Bo Nix, you get to the playoffs, what do you think Mike Tomlin's going to do? Right? What do you think McDermott's going to do? Understand, KC is really a defensive team with a few key offensive pieces. What do you think they're going to do? Right? Has anyone looked at the ranking of the Los Angeles Chargers? What do you think they're going to do? Right? Let me hear from you in the comment section of this YouTube video. Again, I invite everyone to look at the box score. It'll jump out the page at you. Right? If you believe this Denver team is actually competitive, right? They have guys like Cortland Sutton and stuff like that. If you believe the offense is good enough, tell us about it in the comment section of this YouTube video. When I see a team sputtering like this, right, I need to know that the quarterback has at least played in a Super Bowl. That the quarterback, is a Joe Burrow type guy. Where I can say, okay, all it takes is for Joe to get hot and have chemistry with Cortland Sutton and, the tight end, and, things might be able to work. I don't see that guy on this Bronco roster. Let me hear from you. Thanks for stopping by.